Catholic Secondary School in Milton Keynes. That means we teach from the age 11 to 18. We have 1,849 pupils on school site, and we have just over 300 staff. Now that includes teaching staff and our support staff. Now just to give you an idea of where our school is, we are in the middle of London and Birmingham. So London is just in this bottom corner down here, and then Birmingham's up in the top, and we're right in the middle of that. So we're an hour either side of them. So just to put that in a bit more perspective for you, hopefully that helps you get an idea of where we are. Okay, so this is my first time in Germany, so I apologise for my lack of German. Okay, and I hopefully next time will know a little bit more for you. Now, just to give you some insight into our school, our vision, our mission is to do the best that is possible. So we are trying to do the best that we can for every pupil that we have in our care. Now, obviously, as part of that, our vision is to make sure that every pupil is integrated into everyday life and the teaching of the school. Now, within our school, inclusivity is a very big part of that. So we have an inclusive nature. We have got special educational needs of all different types at our school. That includes visually impaired pupils, hearing impaired pupils, and communication pupils. Now at the moment, we have 10 visually impaired pupils, and we have 8 hearing impaired pupils on our school site. And it's very important to us that they have the same access of its learning as any other pupil or staff member at our school. Now, some of these pupils do have dedicated supported study where they have a member of staff that works with them in more of a one-to-one basis, but for the majority of their time at our school, they are in classrooms with up to, and sometimes a little bit more, than 25 pupils with them. Now, just to give you a little bit of background of our use of its learning, we've had it for the past 4 years, so it's something that we've been developing for the past 4 years. As part of that, we have an Its Learning Coordinator role, which I took on in September of 2018. Now, as part of that, we've developed a team across the whole school. That involves a user in every department area that leads their own department. So my responsibility is to teach them what they need to know so they can then take it into their teams and hopefully lead it across the whole school. Now, as part of that, we've gone from sort of about a 74% adopt rate to 93% in a year, which has been quite a big deal for us. It's been very successful in the year as we've looked at it, but it's something that we've had to work on very hard for the last year to make sure every single person at school is using it. And as you can see, we've still got a little bit of a way to go. Now, just to start you off with some of our case studies that hopefully will go into a little bit of depth for you. So when I talk about our visually impaired pupils, we have a range of different visually impaired pupils. We have some that just need larger print font, so that's absolutely fine in terms of enlarging a piece of work and putting that on the learning platform. We also have some pupils who rely on Braille and tactile. So they have no sight at all, and they're reliant on us having something physical for them to use. Now, you might be wondering how that works with our learning platform, because obviously it's on a digital basis, they can't necessarily do that. Now, to make sure that we're able to do this, we've had to work with Its Learning over the last year to work out what's the best strategy for us to make sure they're able to access those same resources. Now, as part of that, we have to make sure any resources that we put onto Its Learning are broken into smaller sections so that they're able to access those and to be independent, so that when they go home from school, they're also able to access those resources at home, perhaps with their parents or somebody at home. Now, with that, some of the things that we do is we look at customising their Its Learning. So when we go into their settings, they can customise it and they can change some of the features. So one of the things that some of our pupils might do is they might switch on the accessibility tool within that so that they get a slightly simplified structure when they go into Its Learning. That helps them just to navigate it themselves. So when they go in, they get a slightly different page of their homepage. It's very, very slightly different, but it obviously helps them quite a lot in being able to distinguish between the different course blocks. Now, some of our pupils, the ones that need Braille and tactile, obviously this doesn't help them. This isn't something that works for them. However, it does help the learning support member of staff that's with them, because one of our pupils uses an iPad at the moment, and they use the voiceover function. Now, if you've ever tried to practice this, it's very difficult to use, and these pupils are absolutely fantastic at making it work for them. They are incredibly good. I sat down with this particular pupil last year, and she was very patient. She sat with me for an hour and a half and went through how she uses Its Learning. And one of the things that I found really challenging is, because of the voiceover, what she does is she taps on the left and the right of the screen to go left and right through all of the text on that page. Now, one of the things that's very difficult is the speed that she will listen to it at. I had to ask the person to slow it down so that I could actually hear the voiceover that was being said, because obviously she was so used to it, she was happy to run through and to work her way through it. Now from my point of view, I couldn't use it. And it's something that we have to work with our pupils, and they have to teach us how to use it. They tell us what they need, and they are fantastic at letting us know what they need. So the first thing that we always do is we ask them what works for you. And with this pupil did give me a nice long list to send back to itslearning and say to them, how do we do all of this? And then as a result, we've had to work together to make sure we can do that. But it has been something that we need to make sure our resources are voice-over friendly. So that means not putting in big blocks of text. It means breaking things up into smaller sections. It means making sure we've titled things really appropriately so that they understand what they are trying to read through and what they are hearing. It does mean that we need to work with the learning support team at our school. It's quite a large team in our school in particular, and we have to make sure they understand what we need from a teaching point of view, maybe a subject specialist point of view, and what they then tell us their pupil needs in particular. Now for some of our pupils, like I say, it is an enlarged print, and for some it is that braille font, and that's something that when we set their courses up on itslearning, at the moment each pupil that has a visual impairment has their very own course where their resources can be put for them. It means that we can tidy them a lot quicker and a lot better for them so they can function independently at home and understand where all of their resources are. Some of these pupils use the voiceover on the iPads, and some use text to voice on itslearning, so there's those two functionalities. Obviously, from our point of view, our pupils are used to using iPads in every lesson with every online resource that they have. So when they switch to itslearning, they're very used to using it, so they want to continue. But it is something that we as staff need to work out what's the best way for them to use it in the future. As part of that, some of our pupils will use things like Zoom text to enlarge fonts within the screen. Now, when they do that, the voiceover on an iPad in particular is quite easy to find. It's on the general settings, but if you tick that box that says voiceover, it becomes incredibly difficult to use because you have to understand where to click and how to use it. And the little button here is the speaking rate. Now for me, I need it a lot lower than where it's at the moment. My pupils that use voiceover will have that bar right to the right-hand side, and they will use it completely on the right-hand side. Now, I can't pick that up when they read it. They are amazing, and they will say to me, what do you mean, miss? You can't read that, you can't hear it. And I'm like, no, I need you to slow it down for me. But they will work very quickly, and they get used to it very quickly. And it's quite a nice functionality to be able to use for your pupils, and to make sure they have that accessibility at school and at home. Now, one of the things that will do is when they use that voiceover, it will have a very solid block around that piece of text. What that does is enables us as staff who are perhaps sitting with that pupil to understand where they are within the text. So when it is reading at their speed, I haven't got to consistently ask them to slow it down. I can sit there and follow along on the screen as to what they're looking at. It is very difficult to pick left and right in the moment, and I know itslearning are doing a lot of work to make that a little bit nicer for us to use, but it is a really good functionality in terms of that text that's on perhaps your home page or a course page within your itslearning course. Now, that's one aspect of what we use. The other aspect of what we use is for hearing impaired pupils. Now again, we in England use the British Sign Language with our hearing impaired pupils, and some of them have some hearing and some don't have any, so sign language is a really big important deal at our school. And one of the things that we like to do is to have some kind of idea of what they need in your classroom when they walk in. Now it might be that when they come into the classroom they have a sign language interpreter there who will stand nearby to turn everything into sign language for that pupil. But one of the things is obviously, like me coming here to Germany and not knowing much German, it's very difficult to communicate with other people. And obviously for them, we don't want them to feel that they are out at the side and not able to participate within a lesson. So we actually have a hearing impaired teacher at our school, and him himself has just had his cochlear implant put in, and he is doing his very best to set up a course that will teach everybody at the school a little bit of sign language. Now that might just be how to say hello or the different letters in finger spelling, but it's to try and make sure that everybody's got an opportunity to communicate with these pupils. And as a result, we've had lots of pupils who are not hearing impaired take their British Sign Language exam and get the first level of qualification just so they can communicate with their peers, which is absolutely fantastic from my point of view. Now, one of the things that he's looking at is what's the best thing to do in terms of matching with our visually impaired pupils. How can you help them communicate with them as well, which is quite a challenge for him to work on. But he's setting up videos on his own course that he can share with the entire school. So obviously the power of its learning is he can set up a course and add every single person at our school site. Whether or not I choose to look at that is down to me, but the option is there for me to go and have a look at and try to learn a little bit. He uses a combination of different things. So he might put up a particular sign of the week that he wants everybody to learn. He might put up the finger spelling alphabet to get everybody to just pick up a few letters. Every time I see him, he asks me to spell my name. And that's quite nice because it tells me to remember how to do it. But he starts in different levels. So pupils in perhaps year 7 or perhaps like me who don't know very much British Sign Language can start on level 1 and then they can build up. And he will, when you're ready, he'll work with you one-to-one, he'll work with small groups, and he will enter you for that exam to sit so that you have that qualification if you want it. And it's quite a nice course in that he's building it from scratch. He started last year and he's building it slowly but surely to make sure there's lots of resources there, but that it's in small chunks so that someone that doesn't know very much of it can pick it up and try and sort of learn a little bit of British Sign Language as they go. So hopefully over the next year or so we'll see even more resources and he'll start putting more videos and things like that in. He's talking about making some for himself, so hopefully they'll go up soon. Now, it's quite difficult because I saw, I think earlier on, how many students people had at different schools. And when I say 1,800 pupils, people sort of think, oh, that's quite a lot. And from my point of view, our school, the picture at the beginning doesn't really give a good sense of it because it's actually in different blocks all across the school site. So I work in what's called J block for maths. Doesn't make a lot of sense being a J, but it does to us. So we have J block for maths, and then I might have to walk across a campus to get to English or languages, for example. Now, one of the things that does is it spreads our school out. It's great in summer because it's nice and warm, you're happy to be outside in the sunshine, but in winter when it's raining or perhaps snowing, it's a little bit upsetting. But the really difficult thing we have is we have so many pupils and so many staff working together and collaboratively has been quite a challenge for us. It's been something we've really had to dedicate that time to. Now, when we first started using itslearning, it was something that was more of an option across our school. We weren't told we had to use it. We were told we had this learning platform and it was how we wanted to use it. So we were asked whether we wanted to set up our own courses, and we were asked whether or not we wanted to attend the meetings that told us about how to use itslearning. Now, I, along with about 5 or 6 other people across the school, out of those 300 staff members, decided to dedicate a little bit of our own time to using itslearning. And over the first couple of years, we started embedding our courses and going to more of the training sessions that itslearning put on for us. And eventually, that group grew and grew and grew. And we had many more people going. Now, as a result of that, we have now got regular training sessions embedded. It is now no longer an optional piece of work we can do. It's something we all have to use. As part of that, we have the internal training sessions that we will run, and we have external ones that we ask itslearning to come in and help us with. Now, as part of that, we still have that super users group. We now refer to it as a steering group because we call it that we're steering itslearning across the whole school. We have time every half term, so that's every 5 to 6 weeks, where we will meet up as a group and discuss the things that we would like to do. Now, like I say, sometimes that results in a long list we send to itslearning for help, and sometimes it's something that we just work through what we would like to do. But what's really nice about that is I get to work with people from every different department across the whole school. And that helps me because as a maths teacher, I perhaps don't know what English need. And whereas English, they perhaps don't know what a maths department need. Now, hopefully, when we go on to looking at that over the next couple of years, we'll have more than one person from every department. There we go. But we at the moment have at least one person. Now, one of the things I want to sort of ask you about a little bit, hopefully later on today, is how many people across your school are meeting on a regular basis to discuss itslearning. Now, we have every member involved in using itslearning now, but we have a varied use of that. We have some people that are really strong, really happy to use a learning platform, and we have some that are quite sort of reluctant or unsure of how to use it. And it's something that it's really important that we work together. So as part of our groups, we now say that it needs to be a different member at points in the year so they have that variety and they have the opportunity to learn a little bit about it. Now, some of our key strategies. So some of the key strategies that we have across school have helped us to push our use of itslearning on. Now, one of the things that we started off with, quite simply, first thing I did when I got my new role was to come up with some help sheets. Now, some of the resources we got from itslearning were fantastic, but I'm going to be honest, our staff needed something a lot more concise. They needed bullet points, they needed pictures that helped them, and they needed very small sentences that told them exactly what they needed to do. So that's exactly what we started off with. We did a help sheet that told them the key things. Things like setting up a course, adding your participants, how do you set an assignment, How do you make sure someone's looked at a piece of resource on your work that you've put in time into putting in? How do you send a message? And all of those things that we started off with meant that every single person at that point could do that. We kept going with that, and we've developed them to much more serious and much more in-depth parts of itslearning. But I think the first bit that we started off with, just having those help sheets, really helped people understand how they could use itslearning and what it would look like when they were doing it. It was quite nice to go back to, because you go in a training session, you spend an hour looking at it, you go away, a week later you're sitting in front of your computer trying to put it into practice. You need something to refer to sometimes, okay? And that really helped us. The next thing we did was we tried to make sure everyone had a responsibility within itslearning. Now, we could all set up our own courses, and we could all have courses that pupils could have access to, but they only work if we are consistent in putting resources onto those courses. So one of the things that we had to do was think about what we wanted to put on there. We have some teachers at our school that are very happy to put all of their lessons on itslearning, and we have some that are less so, would like to keep their lessons for them and perhaps just share pieces of homework or independent learning. Now, that means that some pupils are getting everything they could ever find, and some pupils perhaps weren't. So to make sure we make it as fair as possible, one of the things we've insisted this year, so we only started in September of this year, is to use the calendar for setting all independent learning. Now, that's all homework tasks. So every single teacher has to set their homework on the calendar on itslearning. And that has meant that adopt rate that was at 84% last year, 73% this time last year, went right up to 93 because every single member of staff was having to go in every single day. And putting that on pupils and staff and saying you need to check it regularly really meant that they were seeing itslearning as often as they possibly could. So it really helped us to make sure they were looking at itslearning. Now, the other thing that we've tried to do is to come up with department areas. So if I'm insisting that my pupils look at itslearning, I need to make sure the department I work in is also looking at itslearning every day. So some of the resources that we rely on looking at every single day that we might have had on our own computers or on a shared network or perhaps something on an Excel spreadsheet, we now only link them through itslearning. So the staff members can only access them if they log into itslearning. So we have things like a rota for when we're due to walk around the school site and make sure we're visible. We have things like iPads and Chromebooks that we perhaps want to have access to, so we have a spreadsheet on our itslearning page that we have to book them out through. We have all our model math petitions, for example, in the maths department, where we're sending certificates home to pupils and to parents, and we put their names into that spreadsheet there so they're all centralised so we have a record across the year. All of our documents that we share across the school site also go onto this page because that's where all the important information is. That way we know our staff is looking at it as regularly as possible. Now, we did this for staff to begin with. We found it quite helpful, so we did something for students very similar. We tried to make the student pages as interactive as possible. Now, obviously, that's a challenge because going back to our pupils that perhaps are visually impaired or hearing impaired, we need to make sure it works for them as well. But one of the things we did was take that backwards and say, actually, if it's working for our visually impaired pupils and our hearing impaired pupils, it will also work for any other pupil that's accessing that piece of work. So we've tried to make them interactive. We've tried to make it a little bit like they might see a social networking site at home so that they're likely to scroll through it and find things. And hopefully, as a result, they will be talking about them outside of class. And we have seen a big increase in what they'll say to us in lessons and outside of lessons. Now, one of the things that they asked me to talk a little bit about is how can you increase your inclusivity? Now, like I said, the pages, how you make them interactive is a big deal. How can you make sure pupils are able to access things quickly and locate things and make sure they're understanding exactly what you've made accessible for them? So making it really clear, using diagrams where possible helps a lot of pupils, and using very clear text to highlight things and to put things as headers is really helpful. Setting discussion blocks. Now, you do have to monitor them very carefully with pupils. You do need to be looking at them yourself and reading through what they write, but it gives them an opportunity to talk to each other in an open, safe space where they all feel included. Using assignments and surveys to collect responses from pupils to get their opinions. What do they need? So your assignment might not be a specific subject based. It might just be, what do you need us to use itslearning for to help you better in your studies? And that's something that we've really found helps because we get the feedback from pupils. They are very willing to tell you exactly what they feel with itslearning and let you know what they need. But make sure you're asking your pupils. One of the things we often do at school is we'll sit in an office and we'll talk about it ourselves. We'll have our ideas that we think are really useful, but we forget that these pupils are on devices almost all of the time. They are looking at their phones, their computers, their tablets almost all the time. Perhaps when you're not talking to them, but every other opportunity they get, they're using them. So they know what they want from an online service. They know what they would like on a digital platform. So making sure you're taking ideas from them. The other thing that I strongly suggest that has worked incredibly well for us is to create those teams of super users. Now, it might not just be within your school. If you have these opportunities to meet other people from other schools, getting them perhaps to create their own course that you can share things through, or create a group where you can have something collaboratively to discuss. Get pupils and staff together at the same time to discuss what they work and what they don't work, to discuss how they're using it. And where you have them, if you have a specialist team nearby at a school, or even us over in the UK and you've got questions, don't be afraid to come and ask us and just send us an email and say, what do you currently do? Those specialist teams know pupils really well and they know what works for them. So asking them for a little bit of advice on what you can do will make a big difference. Okay? Does anyone have any questions up to this point? I know it's a lot. I'll be here the rest of the day, so you can come and ask me if you want to.